All right, now as we cover South Asia, looking at those geographic features, of course, the human settlement, some of the cultural landscape, and we're going to look a good bit at population growth and future prospects for this region. So first of all, we're South Asia, what we're talking about. So the main country here that we'll see here is India. So just kind of looking at this region. So not a lot of countries making up South Asia, but definitely a huge impact that they have globally. So India, of course, being the largest, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh make up this region, as well as Sri Lanka. So if we look at some of the tectonic plates, we'll see here again, plate boundaries is where we're going to get that most activity. And you can see this plate boundary going right along this region. So we're definitely going to be seeing some tectonic activity. So that Indian tectonic plate colliding with the Eurasian plate is convergent, meaning that they're coming together and pushing up. So this is going to lead to mountain formation. And specifically that Himalayan mountains due to that coming together of those two plates. So this is the tallest mountain peaks in the earth. So we think about Mount Everest being part of the Himalayan that is due to that convergent plate boundary. So just to give you an idea, almost 30,000 feet above sea level. And this is actually continuing to grow because these plates are still converging. So of course it's slow, but continuing to increase in elevation over time. All right, and just again, an idea here of where that Mount Everest is right here in Nepal and Bhutan. All right, again, just a quick reminder of our convergent plates. So we have the Indian Australian plate coming together, the Eurasia plate, and as they come together, they're pushing on each other, and as they push, those mountains are starting to form and continue forming today. Just looking here again at some of the pictures here of Mount Everest, and of course lots of snow-capped mountains in this region due to that high elevation. And now some of the geographic features, so looking first at the rivers, so a couple major rivers of this area, so the Indus River, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra. So the Ganges, though, suffers from lots of pollution. Again, a video here that talks more about that. So here we have this Ganges river system, and you can see it covers a large part of India. Here the Indus River and the Brahmaputra over to the east side. But again, especially the Ganges has huge amounts of pollution. Again, from the video you can watch, but this is due to untreated sewage that they have due to not having good systematic and lots of rules or laws about that sewage treatment, litter just from individuals, but a lot of religious practices actually puts things into the water as part of those ceremonies. It, unfortunately, though, is used a lot for cooking and bathing, so whenever you have all this pollution, it is significantly impacting this population. So about 80% of all the illnesses in India are due to those waterborne infections due to the pollution that we just talked about. Now the climate in this region is actually a monsoon type of climate. So again, we think about its relation to the equator. So again, talking about those high and low pressure systems that leads to lots of rainfall in this area. So particularly monsoon, which is just seasonal shifts in wind that cause shifts in precipitation, so really heavy and then dry seasons. So the winds come from the northeast in the winter, southwest in the summer, which is what our picture here is showing. So again, depending on the different times of the year, these winds are coming from different directions. So the southwest winds are bringing up moisture from the Indian Ocean. And then we get this intertropical convergent zone, or ITCZ, and that is also going to influence the precipitation. So again, as these northeast winds and these southwest winds come together, they're creating this intertropical convergence zone, and it leads to this monsoon type of pattern. So this provides about 80% of all of India's rainfall is due to this pressure system. So of course that's important though for the agriculture. They also use it a lot for hydroelectric power and a lot of other systems as well. And this is just kind of showing again the rainfall. So the darker blue colors indicate more rainfall. So the rainfall increases over the course of the summer. So as you kind of watch the months down here, the summer is going to be that rainy season followed by a large dry season. All right, now if we look at the climate here and kind of coming back to this, so the monsoon associated rain is due to that orographic effect. And what that is where the mountains force the moisture laden air, so the moisture coming off of the water, so off of the oceans and the seas, it forces that up. So it comes, so we think about the Himalayan mountains, so all of this kind of wet air comes up, hits into the Himalayan mountains, and it pushes it up. So as it moves up though, so we look here at the temperature, it starts to cool, and as it cools, it condenses and it starts to rain. So that warmer air can hold more of the moisture than the colder air. So as we get to the top of the mountains, we're going to have less water. So it results in what's called the rain shadow effect, to where the rain is predominantly on one side of the mountain. So again, we have all of the rain on this one side of the mountain. So we think about the Himalayas, but then on the other side, so over in here is going to be very dry because that moisture never reaches to the opposite side. And that's what's going to cause the formation of the Gobi Desert and the Tibetan Plateau. So let me just erase all this here real quick. So again, we have the Himalayan mountains here. So as the water and the moisture is coming off of the Bay of Bengal and off the Indian Ocean, again, we have lots of rain here on this side of the Himalayas. However, on the opposite side, it's very dry. So we get this Gobi Desert and the Tibetan Plateau. Climate change also very significant here in this region. So that extreme heat is actually making some of the cities in South Asia actually uninhabitable by the 22nd century. So we look here at 2020. Again, it's a very warm climate. However, as that climate continues to increase and the temperature continues to increase by 2070, if things continue at the same rate, again, it's going to be too hot in order for individuals to live in these populations. They're going to need to relocate further north to get away from those extreme temperatures. So Bangladesh is actually very susceptible to coastal flooding. Again, it's right here on this river basin. So as we think about the sea levels rising, essentially just like we'll see with some of the islands in Oceania and those Pacific islands, they're actually becoming covered with water. So as that continues, it's actually going to eat away some of that land and cover it up due to the increase in sea level rise. So again, it has relatively low elevation, even though we have lots of large coastal cities. So again, these individuals are going to have to relocate if the levels continue to rise. Switching now, looking at the human geography and the settlement of this area. So that Indus River Valley civilization is where it is thought that this population began in this region in about 3300 BCE. So it's thought to have about a max of 1 million inhabitants at that time. So along the present day Pakistan-India border is where we're talking about here, is where these individuals kind of first inhabited this region. So they were known for their city planning. They created baked brick houses. They had a good use of their water to divert it to where it needed to go to help with agriculture as well as their water needs. So if we look here at some of these city designs that you can see here, and just how that they were made of that baked brick, but again, in a very organized manner. Now, British colonization, of course, impacted this area. So around the 17th to 20th century, they established the East India Trading Company, and that's an extremely powerful and profitable trading company. They even had their own army as they were getting resources and becoming very important in the trade routes. So they gained independence, though, in 1947. So again, relatively new whenever we're talking about history. So Gandhi had a huge part in that, of them gaining their independence. Thinking about religion, so Muslim dominated the region that became Pakistan. So that's kind of what caused the separation, was due to different religious beliefs. So Muslims were in the Pakistan border. Hindu was the main religion here in India. So again, mainly separated based on religious differences. So not all Hindus and Muslims, though, were proper in their country, just meaning whenever Britain kind of separated everybody based on religion, not everybody fit the mold. So there are Muslims in India, and there are Hindus in Pakistan. So it does result, though, in a lot of movement. So again, people being persecuted, so causing them to move more to areas that are supportive of their culture. Now, Nepal and Bhutan are largely isolated from colonization due to that geographic isolation. So again, they were up here in the Himalayas, so it was harder for individuals to get there to colonize it. Again, due to those Himalayans. So that offered some advantages. So they escaped colonization, and that kind of, they weren't forced to conform to the European cultures. Disadvantage, though, is that they lagged behind economically. So they weren't part of that trade union. They weren't able to gain economies from importing and exporting due to their kind of isolation. A little bit more about Hinduism. So this is a polytheistic, pluralistic religion. It has about 1 billion followers worldwide. So I have a video link here, but they believe in dharma, karma, and reincarnation. Kind of the basis of this religion. So historically, this social stratification was inherent to Hinduism because of the caste system. So you were born into kind of your class. So if you were poor, your whole family was going to stay that way. If you were rich, family stayed that way. Again, royalty, that type of thing. So you couldn't move between castes. This is the most common religion in India. And again, a little video here if you're interested in these various religious practices, but looking at Hinduism and these especially different deities that are up here, and what this one's all about. Also talking about Buddhism, this actually emerged from Hinduism. It's based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. So he became actually the first Buddha, which is referred to as the awakened one. It has 4 noble truths that make up this religion. Again, more in the video if you're interested. So it has a lot of different variations to Buddhism. It has about 500 million followers, not quite to the point of Hinduism, but it's very common in Nepal and Bhutan because of its proximity to China, which is where this is more popular. Now, if we look at South Asia's population, so switching now to kind of some demographics. So South Asia is actually one of the most populous regions on Earth. So if we look at this kind of picture down here, so India has about 1.35 billion people, so almost as many as China. But if we compare that even to the United States, where we have 327 million, So again, as far as population, this is one of the most populous regions in all of the world. So it's the second most populous country, second only to China. So the characteristics of this population, so some of the terms here, so we have accrued birth rate. We mentioned this earlier back in the introduction. This is just the number of children born per 1,000 people. The death rate, the number of people who die every year per 1,000. Infant mortality is another indicator, so just the number of children who don't make it past their first birthday per 1,000 people. And then life expectancy is just the average age that most people live to in that population. So again, we talked before about the demographic transition in different countries or at different stages. So the most basic kind of one that we don't really see other than maybe some different tribal communities, but stage 1, so we have a high birth, high death rate, so everything kind of stays the same. Then as the population starts to increase in stages 2 and 3, where we have better health care, not as many people, so again, our death rate starts decreasing, but also the birth rate typically falls again due to family planning or just not needing to have as many kids for various reasons, and then kind of starts as we plateau into stages 4 and 5. So again, just kind of the picture here from your book. So again, stage 1, the birth rate and death rate is pretty similar, so not a lot of change in the population. Then as we move through the stages, the birth rate starts going down. So again, we think about not having kids for farming or again, better planning, so birth control and access to contraception. But then also the death rate starts decreasing. So better health care, more industrialized nations that can have medicines and access to health care. So if we look at the population of India, that birth rate is hugely declining. So again, individuals not having as many kids, but again, also the death rate is going down, though we are starting to see a little blip here, the increase. Of course, 2020, we think about COVID, the impacts that it had. So overall, though, India's population is increasing exponentially over time here and continues to do so. So based on that, which stage do you think India would be in? So we're seeing a large increase in population. Again, birth rate is going down, but death rate is also going down. Give you a second. Yeah, so stage 3 is where India is at. So again, that exponential growth in their population due to that falling birth rate, but also the death rate that is falling slowly. Now, what's interesting here about this area is that males and females aren't quite the same. So population pyramids look at the number of males and females at different ages. So birth all the way up to elderly at 80 plus years. But again, looking at the number of males versus females. Now, what's interesting is that India, there's actually an increase or a surplus per se of males. So there are more males, especially in the kind of child rearing ages, so the teen to early 20s. Comparatively, there are more males, so we see over 60 million males, whereas females are only at about like 55 million. So we see this surplus of men compared to women due to various reasons. But this is actually your discussion question and what it's based on, so you can kind of dig into this a little bit more and provide some insights and discussion about the impacts that this surplus of men can have on this region.